The history of the galaxy was written in the blood of the exiled, recorded on tablets of sun-bleached bone and stored in the high archives where only the designated scholars dared to tread. For 1,000 years, the story had remained unchanged. It was a simple narrative, clean and sharp as a scalpel. Humanity had cancer. They had been a species of noise, chaos, and unbridled ambition that refused to kneel before the symmetry of the galactic spiral. They had not just rebelled against the ruling empires, they had tried to rewrite the laws of physics themselves, tearing at the fabric of reality in their lust for dominance. So the great houses, led by the immortal Velari dynasty, had cast them out. They had sealed the human race behind the rift, a tear in space-time that led to nowhere, a void from which nothing ever returned. Princess Zevra of House Velari knew this story by heart. She had recited it since she was old enough to speak. But as she stood on the obsidian balcony overlooking the capital city of Prime, she felt nothing but a profound and suffocating boredom. The ceremony was endless. Beneath her, a sea of courtiers in robes of iridescent silk bowed in perfect unison. They chanted the hymn of order, a low droning sound that vibrated against the crystal spires of the palace. Zevra adjusted the ceremonial collar around her neck. It was made of heavy gold and pinned her movements, forcing her to stand with the rigid posture befitting the third heir to the throne. She was 24 cycles old, possessing the terrifying symmetry of her lineage, skin the color of pale moonlight, eyes that shifted from violet to black depending on the spectrum of the sun, and hair that fell like liquid silver down her back. She was beautiful, she was adored, and she felt like a statue trapped in a garden of stone. A drone drifted past her face, capturing her image for the planetary broadcast. She forced the corners of her mouth upward into the serene, untouchable smile that the Empress demanded. Inside her mind, however, she was miles away. She was thinking of the forbidden data slates she kept hidden beneath the floorboards of her private quarters. They were fragments of the pre-exile era, corrupted files that the censors had missed. They spoke of humans not as monsters, but as creators. They spoke of music that was not mathematical, of art that was not symmetrical, and of a capacity for love and rage that terrified the cold. Logical hearts of the Velari. The chanting rose to a crescendo, then cut off instantly. Silence fell over the capital. It was time for the Empress to speak. But the Empress did not appear. Instead, the grand holographic projection above the city flickered. The serene blue light of the Velari seal twisted, bleeding into a harsh, jagged red. A murmur rippled through the millions of people below. Zevra felt a chill crawl up her spine, cutting through the heat of the midday sun. The heavy golden collar suddenly felt less like jewelry and more like a shackle. The High Chamberlain rushed onto the balcony, his usually immaculate robes in disarray. He did not bow. He did not even look at the crowd. He went straight to Zevra's mother, Empress Valara, who sat on the diamond throne behind the balcony's edge. Zevra turned, ignoring protocol. She stepped closer, straining to hear. "We have lost the perimeter," the Chamberlain whispered, though in the utter silence of the balcony, his voice carried like a shout. "Defensive Station 9 is gone." "Gone?" The Empress's voice was like cracking ice. "You mean destroyed? Is it the Krell Raiders?" "No, Your Majesty," the Chamberlain said, and Zevra saw true terror in the man's eyes for the first time in her life. "Not destroyed, vanished. There is no debris. There is no distress signal. The station and the 4,000 souls aboard simply ceased to exist, and we have visuals of the intruders." Zevra stepped forward. "Show us." The Empress shot her daughter a warning look, but she nodded to the Chamberlain. He tapped his wrist console, and a three-dimensional projection materialized in the air between them. It was a recording from a long-range sensor buoy, taken only minutes ago. It showed the starry expanse of the border sector. In the center of the frame sat Station 9, a massive rotating fortress of durasteel and light. Then, from the dark, they appeared. They did not come out of hyperspace with the flash of Cherenkov radiation that marked all known engines. They simply bled into reality. 3 ships. They were pitch black, absorbing the starlight around them. They were not blocky or geometric like Velari vessels. They looked like spearheads, sharp and predatory, with hulls that seemed to shift and ripple like muscle beneath skin. They moved without inertia. One moment they were distant, the next they were flanking the station. There was no exchange of fire, no plasma lances, no void torpedoes. The lead ship simply pulsed with a violet light, and Station 9 began to dissolve. It turned to dust, then to atoms, then to nothingness, wiped from the canvas of the universe in under 10 seconds. The recording ended. The Chamberlain was trembling. They broadcast no identity code. They do not hail us. They are just deleting us. Humans, Zevra whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and impossible. The Empress stood up, her long shadow falling over the projection. That is impossible. The rift is sealed. Humanity is dead. They are not dead, Zevra said, her heart hammering against her ribs. They were waiting. The war room was a sphere of polished obsidian, lit only by the tactical maps floating in the center. The air smelled of ozone and fear. The 12 Grand Admirals of the Velari fleet were shouting over one another, their voices echoing off the curved walls. "We must mobilize the Armada," Admiral Kalin roared, slamming his fist onto the tactical table. "We strike them before they reach the core worlds. We burn them out of the sky." "With what?" countered High Strategist Irix. "Did you not see the footage? Our shields will not hold. Our weapons are designed to fight shields, not whatever that was. We need to fortify the capital. We need to retreat and regroup." "Retreat?" Kalin spat. "The Velari do not retreat before ghosts." Zevra sat at the edge of the table, watching the argument cycle in circles. She saw the panic masquerading as aggression. These men and women had known peace for 10 centuries. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. They thought war was a game of mathematics, of superior numbers and tonnage. They did not understand that the enemy they faced had spent 1,000 years in the dark, evolving while the Empire stagnated in the light. "Silence," the Empress said. She did not shout, but her voice cut through the din instantly. She sat at the head of the table, her face impassive. "We do not know their numbers. We do not know their capabilities. Engaging the Armada now could leave the homeworld defenseless if this is a diversion." "It is not a diversion," Zevra said. All eyes turned to her. It was rare for the princess to speak in the war room. Usually she was there as decoration, a symbol of the continuity of the line. "Speak, daughter," the Empress said, her eyes narrowing. Zevra stood up. She smoothed the nanosilk of her gown, buying herself a moment. "They destroyed a border station to get our attention. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have jumped directly to Prime. They have the technology to bypass our sensors. They are waiting at the border for a reason." "And what reason is that?" Kalin sneered. "To mock us?" "To talk," Zevra said. Laughter rippled through the room, nervous and sharp. "You think the Exile returns for conversation?" Irix asked. "They are monsters. Highness, they are chaos incarnate." "They are organized," Zevra corrected. "Did you see the formation? Did you see the precision of the attack? That was not chaos. That was a message. They are showing us the gun on the table before they sit down. She has a point, the Empress mused, tapping a finger against her throne. If they invade now, we lose. We need time. We need to understand what we are facing. I will go, Zevra said. The room went silent again. This time, the silence was absolute. You? The Empress asked, her expression unreadable. I am the symbol of our future, Zevra said, her voice gaining strength. If you send an admiral, it is an act of war. If you send a diplomat, it is a sign of weakness. But if you send a princess, it is a curiosity. It is a gesture of respect, however unearned. It buys us time. Zevra knew she was manipulating them. She knew she was playing on their pride. But beneath the political calculus, her heart was racing with a dark, fervent excitement. She wanted to see them. She wanted to look into the eyes of the monsters that had terrified the galaxy for a millennium. She wanted to know if the myths were true. The Empress looked at her daughter for a long time. Zevra saw a flicker of something in her mother's eyes. Calculation? Pride? Or perhaps relief that she would not have to risk her own skin just yet. Very well, the Empress said. You will take the Gilded Wing. You will travel to the neutral crescent, near the breach point. You will hail them. You will determine their intent. And if they fire? Kalen asked. Then we will have a martyr, the Empress said coldly, and the galaxy will unite in vengeance. Zevra felt the weight of the sentence, but she did not flinch. I will not fail. The Gilded Wing was a masterpiece of Velari engineering. It was less a ship and more a flying palace, shaped like a teardrop of silver and gold. Inside, the air was scented with jasmine and the gravity was set to a comfortable standard. Zevra stood on the bridge, alone save for her personal guard of 2 silent sentinels and the ship's pilot, a synthetic intelligence integrated into the hull. They dropped out of hyperspace in the neutral crescent, a sector of space filled with the colorful dust of a dying nebula. The gases swirled in hues of violet and bruised orange, creating a backdrop that felt surreal and dreamlike. Sensors are clear, the pilot's voice echoed from the walls. No contacts. Hold position, Zevra commanded. She was dressed in her formal diplomatic attire, a gown of white nanosilk that shimmered like pearls, a high collar of platinum, and a veil of translucent energy that obscured her features, rendering her a mysterious glowing silhouette. It was armor of a different kind. Waiting, the pilot said, minutes stretched into hours. Zevra paced the deck. Had she been wrong? Had they simply moved on, burning worlds as they went? Then, the light in the nebula changed. It did not flash. It deepened. A shadow began to grow in the center of the orange cloud, a stain of absolute darkness that spread outward like ink in water. Contact, the pilot said, its voice modulating with distress. Massive scale, reading biological signatures. Biological? Zevra frowned. On a ship. The shadow parted, and the flagship of the returned fleet emerged. Zevra stopped breathing. It was titanic. It dwarfed the Gilded Wing as a whale dwarfs a minnow. But it was the shape that froze her blood. It was not built of plates and rivets. It looked like it had grown. The hull was a matte black carapace, ribbed and textured like the exoskeleton of a giant insect or the armor of an ancient deep-sea leviathan. Veins of glowing red light pulsed along its length, beating in a slow, rhythmic cycle that looked disturbingly like a heartbeat. It had no engines that she could see, only massive, sweeping fins that seemed to ripple against the vacuum itself. It was silent. It was horrifying, and it was the most magnificent thing Zevra had ever seen. We are being hailed, the pilot said. Audio only. No encryption. Put it through, Zevra said, smoothing her silk with trembling hands. The voice that filled the bridge was deep, distorted by static, yet undeniably human. It spoke the common trade tongue, but with an accent that sounded archaic, sharp, and hard. Unidentified Velari vessel, you are in the gravity well of the flagship Silent God. Power down your engines and prepare for retrieval. Retrieval? Zevra stepped toward the comms panel. This is Princess Zevra of the Velari dynasty. I am an emissary of the Empress. I request a parley with your commander. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. We know who you are, the voice returned. Power down or burn. Zevra looked at the tactical display. The red energy veins on the massive ship were brightening. Do it, Zevra ordered. Highness, that is suicide, the pilot protested. Do it! The gilded wing powered down its drive core. The lights on the bridge dimmed. The great black ship moved forward. It did not use tractor beams. Instead, the front of the hull split open, a jagged maw lined with what looked like cartilage and metal teeth. A cavity of red light was revealed inside. Zevra watched, mesmerized, as the maw widened. The massive ship swallowed them whole. Darkness engulfed the bridge. Then, the sensation of movement stopped. There was a heavy thud as the landing gear made contact with a deck. Atmosphere detected, the pilot said. Oxygen-rich, high nitrogen, safe for Velari physiology. But Highness, I detect thousands of biosigns surrounding us. Zevra reached up and deactivated her energy veil. She wanted them to see her. She wanted to see them. Stay here, she told her guards. Highness, we cannot let you. You will stay, she commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of her bloodline. If they wanted me dead, I would be dead. This is a test. She walked to the airlock. It hissed open, and the ramp descended. Zevra stepped out into the belly of the beast. She had expected a hangar bay. She had expected steel decks and harsh lights. Instead, she stepped onto a floor that felt slightly spongy, like hardened resin. The walls were ribbed and curved, resembling the inside of a massive ribcage. The light came from bioluminescent sacks hanging from the ceiling, casting everything in a dim, amber glow. And there were soldiers. Hundreds of them lined the path. They stood perfectly still, encased in armor that looked like a fusion of matte black metal and muscle fiber. Their faces were covered by smooth, featureless visors. They held weapons that hummed with a low, menacing frequency, rifles that looked like they fired accelerated particles rather than plasma. Zevra walked the gauntlet. She held her head high, her white gown trailing behind her on the dark resin floor, a single point of light in the gloom. She could feel their eyes on her, even through the visors. She could feel the intensity of their discipline. They did not twitch. They did not breathe. At the end of the path, a large circular door spiraled open. Zevra stepped through into a chamber that looked like a command center, though there were no chairs. Only elevated platforms and floating displays of hard light. In the center of the room stood a man. He had his back to her, watching a massive screen that showed the galaxy map, her galaxy, but marked with red targets. He wore a long coat of dark leather and woven armor weave. When he turned, Zevra felt the breath catch in her throat. He was human. The myths had called them ugly, asymmetrical, hairy beasts. This man was none of those things. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a stillness that suggested lethal potential. His face was sharp-angled, with a jawline that could cut glass and dark hair swept back from a high forehead. But he was not entirely organic. His left eye was replaced by an ocular implant that glowed a faint, piercing blue. A web of silver circuitry ran up the side of his neck, disappearing into his hairline. His right hand, resting on a console, was metal, a sleek, skeletal prosthetic that moved with more fluidity than flesh. He was terrifyingly handsome. He watched her approach with a gaze that felt like it was dissecting her soul. He did not bow. He did not smile. "Princess Zevra," he said. His voice was the same one she had heard over the comms, but without the static. It was rich, baritone, and smooth as velvet. "You are far from your golden cage." Zevra stopped 3 paces from him. She fought the urge to step back. The air around him felt charged, electric. "I am exactly where I need to be, and you must be the commander." "I am Commander Riven," he said. He gestured around the room with his metal hand. "Welcome to the Silent God. Your ship, it is alive," Zevra said, unable to keep the wonder out of her voice. "Metal is dead," Riven said simply. "Dead things break. We learn to build with life. It adapts. It heals. It survives." He took a step toward her. The sound of his boots on the deck was heavy, deliberate. "Survival is a lesson your people have forgotten." "My people have known peace for 1,000 years, Zevra countered, lifting her chin. "We have art, philosophy, order." "You have stagnation," Riven corrected. "You have a garden where nothing grows because you have paved over the earth." He stopped directly in front of her. He was much taller than her. She had to crane her neck to look into his eyes, the human one dark brown, the machine one glowing blue. "Why are you here?" "Riven," she asked, dropping the titles. "Did you come to burn it all down? To take revenge for the exile?" Riven studied her face. He looked at the violet in her eyes, the pulse beating at her throat. "Revenge is a waste of energy. It is looking backward. We do not look back." "Then what is this?" She gestured to the map with the red targets. "Reports say you erased a station. That looks like war to me." "We erased a barrier," Riven said. "We removed a lock from a door." He turned back to the screen, waving his hand. The map changed. The red targets vanished, replaced by golden lines connecting thousands of star systems, systems that lay on the fringes, in the neglected sectors, in the dark places the Empire ignored. "For 1,000 years, we drifted in the void beyond the rift," Riven said softly. "We starved. We froze. We died by the millions. But we also learned we stripped away everything that was weak. We merged with our technology. We became efficient, and we realized something." He turned back to her. "The Empire does not rule by power. It rules by silence. It keeps the galaxy separated, afraid and ignorant. It exiled us because we were the variable you could not control." "And now," Zevra whispered. "Now we return," Riven said. "Not to conquer. I have no interest in sitting on your diamond throne, princess." "It looks uncomfortable." A ghost of a smirk touched his lips, transforming his face from terrifying to dangerously charming. "Then what do you offer?" Zevra asked. "A choice," Riven said. "We offer the technology to live without scarcity, the freedom to think without censorship. We offer a pact to any world that wants to break the chains of the Velari." Zevra felt a shockwave go through her. This was worse than war. War her mother could fight. War unified people. But this was an ideological plague. He wasn't threatening to kill them, he was threatening to make them irrelevant. "You want to start a revolution," she said. "I want to finish the one you started when you threw us out," Riven said. "They will destroy you," Zevra said, her voice shaking. "The Armada is vast. You have 3 ships. "We have more than 3 ships," Riven said enigmatically. "And your Armada is made of glass. Pretty to look at, easy to shatter." He stepped closer, closing the gap until he was inside her personal space. She could smell him, scent of ozone, old leather, and something musky and warm. It was intoxicating. It was the smell of a storm. "Why did you come alone, Zevra?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I came to save my people," she said, though the words felt hollow even to her. "Liar," Riven whispered. He reached out. Zevra flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, the cold metal fingers of his prosthetic hand brushed against her cheek. The touch was shockingly gentle. The contrast between the cold steel and the heat of his body radiating from him made her breath hitch. "You did not come to save them," Riven said, his human eye searching hers, stripping away her defenses layer by layer. "You came because you were suffocating in that palace. You read the forbidden files. You looked at the stars and wished for something that wasn't safe." Zevra wanted to pull away. She wanted to slap his hand away and retreat to her ship. But she couldn't move. She was pinned by his gaze, by the raw magnetism of a man who had survived hell and walked back out of it. "You don't know me," she breathed. "I know exiles," Riven said, "and I see one standing right in front of me." He leaned in, his lips inches from her ear. She could feel the heat of his breath on her skin. "You asked if I came for war," he murmured. "The real question is, what were you waiting for?" Zevra stood frozen as he pulled back, his metal fingers lingering on her jawline for a second longer than necessary. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized with a jolt of terror that he was right. She hadn't been afraid when the ships appeared. She had been relieved. "Show me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Show me what you have built." Riven smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. It was the smile of a wolf who had just found the gate to the sheepfold open. "Follow me," he said, "and try not to fall behind." The tour of the silent god was not a walk through a vessel. It was a journey through the belly of a living organism. Riven led the way, his coat sweeping behind him like a shadow, and Zevra followed, her senses overwhelmed by the alien pulse of the ship. In the Velari Empire, technology was sterile. It was cold white alloys, silent humming fields, and hard light interfaces that obeyed voice commands with mathematical precision. Here, the walls breathed. The corridors were ribbed with cartilaginous struts that flexed imperceptibly as the ship maneuvered. The air did not smell of recycled oxygen and ozone. It smelled of wet earth, ozone, and something metallic yet warm, like fresh blood. "You are staring at the bulkheads," Riven noted without turning around. His prosthetic hand flexed as he walked, the servos whining softly. "They are moving," Zevra said, her voice echoing in the damp corridor. "Why do they move?" "Because rigid structures shatter under stress," Riven replied. "Bone heals. Steel does not. We grow our hulls in orbital reefs. We feed them silicates and carbon until they are strong enough to withstand the void pressure. The ship is not just a carrier. Zevra, it is a companion." They passed a section of the wall that was translucent, revealing a massive chamber beyond. Inside, Zevra saw fluid-filled tanks where massive neural bundles pulsed with bioluminescent light. Suspended within the fluid were human figures, wires trailing from the base of their skulls, their eyes closed in peaceful REM sleep. Zevra stopped, horrified. "Slaves? You use your own people as processors?" Riven stopped and turned, his blue ocular implant whirring as it focused on her. "Volunteers, and they are not processors. They are pilots, navigators, tactical coordinators. In your empire, you use clumsy voice commands and manual inputs. Here, we link. Thought is instantaneous, action is immediate. They are not enslaved to the ship, Princess. They are the ship. They feel the solar winds on the hull as you feel a breeze on your skin. He stepped closer to the glass. It requires total trust, something the Velari forgot long ago. Zevra looked at the drifting figures. It was terrifying, grotesque, and yet undeniably efficient. She imagined the coordination of the attack on the border station, the way the ships had moved like a school of fish, a single mind dictating 1,000 motions. "It is monstrous," she whispered, though the conviction in her voice was wavering. "Evolution always looks like a monster to those who refuse to change," Riven said darkly. He led her deeper, past the engineering decks where technicians manipulated streams of raw plasma with their bare hands, shielded by shimmering gauntlets that seemed to merge with their skin. He showed her the weapon bays, where missiles were not loaded by mechanical arms but were birthed from synthetic sacs, coated in symbiotic acids that could eat through void shields in microseconds. Finally, they arrived at a heavy door made of black iron, starkly different from the organic flow of the rest of the ship. Riven placed his human hand on the scanner. The door groaned open. "The archive," he announced. The room was vast and circular, lit only by a column of white light in the center. It was cold here, the air dry and still. "You told me we were exiled because we were dangerous," Riven said, walking into the light. "Because we were chaotic, because we threatened peace." "That is the history," Zevra said, stepping onto the platform beside him. "Humanity rose up. You tried to weaponize the rift. The Council had no choice." "Watch," Riven commanded. He did not touch a console. He simply looked at the light, and the room dissolved. Zevra gasped as the reality around her shifted. She was standing in the Grand Senate chamber of Prime, but it was the chamber of 1,000 years ago. The architecture was slightly different, the banners older, but the atmosphere of arrogance was identical. She saw the Empress of that time, her own ancestor, the great matriarch Valeris. She was standing before the council. Her face twisted not in fear, but in a sneering cold fury. "They have unlocked the zero-point energy," Valeris was saying, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the memory. "They have done in a decade what took us a century. If we allow them to continue, they will not just equal us, they will make us obsolete." "Are they a threat?" a counselor asked. "Their ambition is the threat," Valeris shouted, slamming her hand on the podium. "They do not respect the hierarchy. They share their technology freely with the lower species. They disrupt the economy of dependence we have built. We cannot compete with their speed, so we must remove them from the race." The scene shifted. Zevra saw fleets of Velari ships firing on unarmed human transports. She saw the fabrication of evidence, fake transmissions, staged attacks blamed on human terrorists. She saw the final vote, where the decision to exile humanity was made not to save the galaxy, but to preserve the market share and political dominance of the Velari high houses. It was not a war for survival. It was a corporate liquidation. The hologram faded. Zevra was left standing in the cold dark of the archive, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. Her entire life, her education, her moral superiority, it was all built on a lie. "Envy," Riven said, his voice devoid of triumph. "It was just envy. You didn't fear our guns, you feared our potential." Zevra shook her head, backing away from him. This could be faked. You could have fabricated this." "I could have," Riven admitted, stepping toward her, the light from the column casting long shadows across his face. "But you know I didn't. You have seen the stagnation of your people. You have felt the boredom of your court. You know, deep down, that your empire is a rotting carcass painted in gold. Stop it, Zevra snapped. Why? Riven pressed, his voice rising. Does the truth hurt more than the lie? We spent 1,000 years in the dark, freezing, clawing our way back from extinction, while you sat on your thrones and told yourselves you were the guardians of order. You are not guardians. Zevra, you are jailers. I said stop, Zevra screamed. She turned to flee, but the door was closed. She spun back to face him, her chest heaving. You think you are so righteous? You come here with your biological horrors and your mind slaves, and you judge us? We kept the peace. For 10 centuries, there was no war. There was no life, Riven roared back. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Peace without freedom is just a prison. We offer chaos, yes. But chaos is where stars are born. They were inches apart now. The air between them crackled with a tension that had moved beyond politics into something visceral. Zevra looked up at him, hating the way he made her feel small, hating the way his blue mechanical eyes seemed to see right through her nano-silk gown to the terrified woman beneath. You are a barbarian, she spat. And you, Riven growled, are a doll in a glass box. Zevra's hand moved before she thought. She struck him across the face, a sharp, cracking sound that echoed in the silence. Riven did not flinch. He did not recoil. His head turned slightly with the blow, and then he looked back at her, his expression intensifying. Before she could strike again, his hand shot out, his human hand, and grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron, but hot, burning against her skin. Let go of me, she hissed. Make me, Riven challenged. She struggled, pulling against his grip. But he was immovable. The struggle brought their bodies flush against each other. She could feel the hard plating of his armor, the rapid thrum of his heart, or perhaps the ship's heart, beneath it. Her anger, white-hot and desperate, suddenly transmuted into something else. The adrenaline flooding her system wasn't fight or flight anymore. It was a desire. She looked at his mouth. He looked at hers. The air left the room. Zevra surged forward, slamming into him, her free hand tangling in the collar of his coat. She kissed him with all the fury of her shattered worldview. It was not a gentle kiss, and it was a collision. It was teeth and breath and desperation. Riven froze for a fraction of a second, stunned, before a low sound rumbled in his throat. He released her wrist and wrapped his arm around her waist, lifting her slightly off the deck, crushing her against him. His metal hand tangled in her silver hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until Zevra felt dizzy, her knees buckling. She was drowning in him. He tasted of the dark, of danger, of everything she had been forbidden to touch. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, Riven tore himself away. He stumbled back a step, his chest heaving. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes wild. Zevra stood there, trembling, her lips swollen, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She reached out to him, confused, aching. Riven. No, he growled, holding up his hand. He looked angry not at her, but at the situation. At himself. I do not want this. I do not want a moment of weakness from a confused princess. It wasn't a weakness, Zevra said, her voice breaking. It was panic, Riven retorted harshly. Your world is breaking, and you are grabbing onto the nearest thing that feels real. I will not be your rebellion. Zevra. I don't want a Velari puppet acting out a fantasy. He looked at her, his gaze softening just enough to break her heart. I want you. The real you. The one who chooses this when she isn't afraid. The one who knows exactly what she is doing. Zevra opened her mouth to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the ship suddenly shuddered violently. The lights in the archive turned from white to a pulsating crimson. A siren, felt more in the teeth than heard in the ears, began to wail. Riven's demeanor shifted instantly. The lover was gone. The commander returned. He tapped the side of his head, activating his neural link. "Report," he barked into the air. He listened for a second, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "Riven?" Zevra asked, fear replacing the passion in her veins. "What is it?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of pity in his eyes. "It seems your mother has made her choice," Riven said grimly. "Admiral Kalen has just dropped out of warp in the Arkan sector. He opened fire on a clearly marked humanitarian scout vessel, the Pathfinder. It was carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies." Zevra felt the blood drain from her face. Did he destroy it?" "He vaporized it," Riven said, his voice like grinding stones. 150 crew. Gone. He turned toward the door, his coat swirling around him. "Get to your quarters, Princess. The tour is over. Zaraudu, we are at war." Zevra paced the small, sterile guest quarters she had been assigned. The ship was buzzing with activity now. The vibrations in the floor were faster, more urgent. She could feel the silent god preparing to kill. She was a prisoner now, or a hostage. Riven hadn't said it, but the implication was clear. Her people had struck first. The diplomatic immunity she enjoyed was fraying by the second. But she could not sit still. She could not just wait for the news that Riven had retaliated and killed thousands of her people in return. She waited until the ship's cycle dimmed to the night setting. The guards outside her door were efficient, but they were human. They were distracted by the impending conflict. Zevra used a small sonic emitter she had concealed in her jewelry, a standard Velari countermeasure for escaping locked royal suites, and bypassed the door lock. She moved through the shadows of the corridor. She didn't head for the hangar bay or the bridge. She followed the instinct that had been pulling at her since she boarded. She headed for the captain's quarters. The door to Riven's private room was unlocked. Perhaps he didn't fear intruders, or perhaps he simply didn't care. She slipped inside. The room was surprisingly sparse. There was no luxury here, no spoils of war. A simple sleeping cot, a desk covered in physical paper charts, and a viewport that looked out into the streak of hyperspace stars. But in the corner, there was a soft blue glow. Zevra approached it cautiously. It was a holographic projector, sitting on a small pedestal of brushed steel. It was projecting a sphere, slowly rotating. It was a planet, but it wasn't the gray, city-covered sphere of Prime, nor the red dust of the colony worlds. It was a jewel of vibrant sapphire and emerald, oceans of deep, impossible blue, continents of lush green, swirls of white clouds. Earth. Surrounding the hologram were small objects, relics, a cracked pair of spectacles, a book with yellowed pages, a toy soldier made of tin, a dried flower encased in resin. It was a shrine. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Zevra jumped and spun around. Riven was standing in the doorway. He had removed his heavy coat and armor. He wore only a simple gray tunic and trousers. He looked tired. The anger from the bridge had faded, leaving behind a deep, weary melancholy. I shouldn't be here," Zevra stammered. "I came to spy?" Riven asked gently. He walked into the room, not raising an alarm. He went to the small table and poured a dark liquid into 2 glasses. "To understand," Zevra corrected. She looked back at the hologram. "This is Earth? Before the fall?" "Yes," Riven said, handing her a glass. "Before we destroyed the climate, before we rebuilt it, before we were kicked off of it." Zevra took the glass. Her hands were shaking, and she looked at the blue oceans on the projection. I have seen this, she whispered. Riven paused, his glass halfway to his lips. Have you seen images of Earth? No, Zevra said, her voice trembling. In my head. Since I was a child, I have dreams. I am standing under a ceiling that isn't a ceiling. It is blue, endless, and there is a bright yellow light that warms my face, but it isn't a heat lamp, and the air moves on its own. She looked at Riven, her violet eyes wide with confusion. I have never been to a planet with a wild atmosphere. I have lived on Prime my whole life, but I know the smell of that air. I know the sound of water hitting sand. Why do I know that? Riven set his glass down slowly. He looked at her with a mixture of sadness and wonder. The Velari engineered themselves for perfection, he said softly. They spliced their genes to be stronger, smarter, more beautiful. But they needed a baseline, a genetic template that was robust and adaptable. He took a step closer to her. They used human DNA. Zevra. Before the exile, when we were allies, your ancestors interbred with mine to stabilize your genome. That vision, that blue sky, it is not a dream. It is a memory. It is encoded in your double helix, passed down through 1,000 generations of royals who tried to forget where they came from. Zevra felt tears prick her eyes. So I am. Part of the enemy? You are part of the origin, Riven corrected. We are not different species. Zevra, we are two halves of the same broken family. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and transformative. Zevra looked at the man before her, the machine parts, the scars, the human eyes. She didn't see a monster anymore. She saw a mirror. She set her glass down on the desk and took a step toward him. The tension from the viewing chamber returned, but the anger was gone. You said you wanted the real me, she whispered. Riven went still. Zevra. I am not the princess of the Velari right now, she said, her voice gaining strength. I am the woman who remembers the blue sky, and I don't want to be alone in the dark anymore. She reached out and took his hand, the metal one. She lifted it to her lips and kissed the cold steel knuckles. Her eyes locked on his. Riven let out a breath that sounded like a surrender. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough. Yes, she said. He did not rush. There was no violence in his touch this time. He reached out and slowly unclasped the platinum collar at her neck. It fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Next, he found the seams of her nano-silk gown. His fingers, both flesh and metal, moved with a reverence that made her tremble. When the dress pooled at her feet, leaving her standing in the soft blue light of the Earth hologram, Riven looked at her as if she were a sacred text he had been waiting a lifetime to read. Beautiful, he breathed. Zevra reached for the hem of his tunic. She pulled it over his head, revealing the map of his life on his skin. There were scars from plasma burns, ports for neural interfaces, and the seamless transition where flesh met the metal of his shoulder. She traced the scars with her fingertips, learning the history of his pain. Does it hurt? She asked softly, touching the rim of the metal implant in his chest. Only when I remember, he murmured. They moved to the narrow cot. It was not the expansive silk-draped bed of a palace, but Zevra did not care. When Riven lay her down, the contrast of his body against hers was stark and electric. He was hard angles and cool metal. She had soft curves and warm skin. They explored each other with a slow, silent awe. It was a discovery. Zevra marveled at the strength in his arms, the unexpected heat of his skin, the way his mechanical eye dimmed to a soft, pulsating indigo when he kissed her neck. Riven touched her as though he was afraid she might vanish, his hands worshipping the symmetry he had once claimed to despise. There was no politics in the room, no war, no exile. There was only the friction of skin, the mingling of breath, and the desperate, silent language of two lonely souls finding an anchor in the storm. Hours later, the ship was quiet again, save for the distant thrum of the drive core. Zevra lay with her head on Riven's chest, listening to the slow, powerful beat of his heart. She traced invisible patterns on his arm, her mind drifting between the bliss of the moment and the terror of the morning to come. She thought of Kaelin. She thought of her mother. She thought of the war that was now inevitable. "Riven?" she whispered into the darkness. His voice was deep, vibrating through his chest. Zevra lifted her head to look at him. His eyes were closed, his face relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. He looked younger. "What happens if I fall for the enemy?" she asked, the question fragile and terrified. Riven opened his eyes. He looked at her, and the steel was back in his gaze, but it was tempered with a fierce, protective warmth. He reached up and brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. "Then we build a galaxy that no longer calls us that," he said firmly. He pulled her back down against him, wrapping his arms around her as if to shield her from the universe itself. Zevra closed her eyes, breathing in his scent, and for the first time in her life, she did not dream of the blue sky. She felt like she was finally standing under it. The silence of the silent god was broken not by alarms, but by the soft, insistent chime of a priority transmission. It was a sound that belonged to a different world, the sharp, crystal tone of the Velari diplomatic frequency. Zevra woke up with a start, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a moment, disoriented by the dim amber light of the cabin and the hard warmth of the man beside her, she forgot where she was. Then she felt Riven stir, his metal arm heavy across her waist, and the memory of the night crashed into her with the force of a tidal wave. She looked at him, at the scars on his chest rising and falling with his breath, and felt a surge of fierce, terrified protectiveness. Then the chime sounded again, louder this time. Zevra scrambled out of the cot, grabbing her discarded tunic. She tapped her earpiece, activating her internal comms. "Report," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Highness." The voice of her pilot on the gilded wing crackled in her ear. The artificial intelligence sounded frantic. "You must return to the ship immediately. The encrypted dampeners have failed. A data packet was leaked from the silent god's internal sensors to the Velari deep space network. They have footage. Highness, they have biometric readings. They know you are in his quarters." Zevra froze. The blood drained from her face. "Who leaked it?" "Unknown. But the reaction is immediate. The High Council has invoked protocol severance. You have been branded compromised. An emergency recall order has been issued. If you do not depart within 10 minutes, the Gilded Wing is authorized to leave without you, and you will be declared a defector to the state." 10 minutes, Zevra breathed. She looked back at the bed. Riven was sitting up. He was awake instantly, his blue ocular implant glowing in the semi-darkness. He did not look sleepy. He looked like a weapon that had just been armed. "They know," Riven said. It was not a question. "They are recalling me," Zevra said, pulling on her boots with shaking hands. "Riven, I have to go. If I stay, they will claim I have been brainwashed. They will use it as propaganda to rally the entire galaxy against you. They will say the Exile kidnapped the princess and violated her." Riven stood up. He moved with terrifying speed, crossing the room to block the doorway. He was naked, unashamed, his body a map of war and survival. Let them say it. Stay here. We fight them together. We can't win a war against the entire galaxy if they think you are a monster, Zevra pleaded, standing up and facing him. I have to go back. I have to stand before the council and tell them the truth. I have to show them that I am sane, that I chose this. I can stop the mobilization from the inside. Riven's face twisted into a sneer. The tenderness of the previous night evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard cynicism of a man who had seen too much betrayal. You are going back to them, he accused, his voice low and dangerous. You lay with me. You heard the truth, and the moment your golden collar rattled, you ran back to the cage. I am trying to save us, Zevra cried. You are ashamed, Riven growled. He took a step toward her, looming over her. You are ashamed of what you did with the barbarian. You want to go back to your silk sheets and your symmetrical gardens and pretend this was just a moment of madness. How dare you? Zevra hissed. The hurt flared in her chest, hot and blinding. I risked everything for you, my title, my life, my soul. Then stay, Riven roared, slamming his metal fist against the bulkhead. The sound rang like a gunshot. If you leave now, you are choosing them. You are choosing the lie. I am choosing duty, Zevra shouted back. Something you should understand. Commander? Duty, Riven laughed, a harsh barking sound. You are a puppet, Zevra. I told you I didn't want a puppet. I thought I found a woman. I was wrong. The insult landed like a physical blow. Zevra's hand moved before she could stop it. She struck him again, harder than before, her palm cracking against his cheek. I am not a puppet, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. I am the only thing standing between you and annihilation. Riven stared at her. The anger in his eyes warred with something else, pain, deep and ancient. He reached out, grabbing her shoulders. For a second, she thought he would shake her. Instead, he pulled her into him. His mouth crashed onto hers. It was a kiss of desperation, of fury, of a hunger that knew it was about to starve. He kissed her as if he could brand his memory onto her soul, as if he could rewrite her DNA with the taste of him. Zevra clung to him, her fingers digging into his back, sobbing into the kiss. Then, he shoved her away. He turned his back to her, his shoulders heaving. Go, he said, his voice raw. Go back to your empire, princess. But when the sky burns, remember that you walked away from the only freedom you ever had. Zevra stood there for one heartbeat, two. She wanted to stay. Every cell in her body screamed at her to stay, but the chime in her ear was relentless. She turned and ran. She ran through the organic corridors, past the silent soldiers who watched her with faceless masks, and boarded the gilded wing just as the airlock began to cycle, as her ship detached and jumped to hyperspace, leaving the silent god behind in the dark. Zevra fell to her knees on the bridge and wept. The reception on Prime was not a homecoming. It was an incarceration. The gilded wing was intercepted at the edge of the system by 3 dreadnoughts. They escorted her not to the royal spire, but to the Citadel of Clarity, a white, windowless fortress used for high-level interrogations. Zevra was stripped of her nano-silk gown. Her jewelry was confiscated. She was dressed in a rough gray tunic and placed in a room of blinding white light. There were no shadows here. There was nowhere to hide. For 3 days, she was interrogated. Did he force you? The Inquisitor asked. He was a thin man with pale skin and eyes that never blinked, modified to record micro-expressions. No, Zevra said, sitting straight in the hard chair. We spoke. He showed me the history. Did he drug you? No. Did he access your neural lace? No. The footage suggests intimacy, the Inquisitor said, his voice devoid of inflection. He tapped the table, and a holographic still appeared, grainy, stolen from a security feed. It showed Zevra in Riven's arms, her head thrown back, her hand in his hair. Zevra did not look away. She forced herself to stare at the image. It was consensual. It was treason, the Inquisitor corrected. You copulated with the enemy commander. You compromised the genetic purity of the Velari line. You are contaminated. Subject Zevra. He stood up and signaled to the mirrors on the wall. The medical scans confirm you carry no biological pathogens. But the mind is softer. You will remain in isolation until the Council decides your utility. Zevra was moved to the Sapphire Tower. It was a gilded prison. She had a view of the city, of the endless orderly processions of hover cars and the gleaming spires of the nobility. But the doors were sealed, the windows were energy shielded, and her personal guard had been replaced by silent, heavily armed sentinels who did not speak to her. She was a pariah. The news feeds, which she could access but not interact with, were spinning the narrative wildly. Princess Zevra had been abducted and subjected to psychological torture. The Exile fleet was painted as a horde of rapacious savages. The galaxy was terrified. But Zevra began to see the cracks. Locked in her tower, she had nothing but time. She used her old access codes she had memorized as a child playing hide-and-seek in the databases, to slip past the localized firewalls. She couldn't broadcast out, but she could dig deep. She went looking for the truth Riven had shown her. It took her 2 weeks. She found it in a fragmented subdirectory of the Imperial Treasury logs, disguised as a crop yield report from 1,000 years ago. It was a financial projection titled Analysis of Human Integration versus Elimination. Zevra read it, her breath catching in her throat. The document was cold, mathematical proof of everything Riven had said. It detailed how human innovation was outpacing Velari adaptations by a factor of 3 to 1. It projected that within 50 years, human trade routes would render the Velari currency obsolete. The conclusion was underlined in red. Coexistence is a statistical impossibility for Velari dominance. Recommendation: total removal of the variable. Strategy: frame the variable as an existential threat to galactic stability. They hadn't exiled humanity because they were dangerous warriors. They had exiled them because they were better businessmen, better inventors, better dreamers. Zevra sat back in her chair, staring at the holographic text. The rot of her empire wasn't just deep, it was foundational. The symmetry, the order, the peace, it was all purchased with a lie so massive it had reshaped history. You were right, she whispered to the empty room. Riven, you were right. While Zevra rotted in her tower, the galaxy began to change. The invasion everyone feared did not happen. The silent god and its fleet did not burn the border worlds. They did not glass the cities. Instead, they broke the chains. Reports began to filter in from the fringe sectors. A mining colony in the outer rim went dark, then came back online declaring independence. They claimed their planetary AI, previously shackled by Velari restraining bolts to maximize production, had been liberated by a human ship. The AI was now managing the colony for the benefit of the workers, tripling their food rations and lowering their work shifts. Another report from a shipyard. The automated defense grid had turned its guns outward, refusing to accept Velari codes. The shipwrights were cheering in the streets. Riven wasn't conquering worlds. He was waking them up. He was turning the Empire's greatest asset, its total reliance on automated systems, against it. The common people of the fringe, long neglected by the core worlds, began to whisper the name Riven not with fear, but with awe. They called the humans the Unbound, and in the silence of her room, Zevra began to write. She found a back door in the communication relay, a narrow frequency used by maintenance drones. It was slow and risky, but it was open. But she encoded her messages in binary bursts, hidden inside weather report packets. I found the treasury logs. You were right. It was greed. It was always greed. I am sorry. She sent it out into the void, not knowing if he would ever receive it. 3 days later, a reply came back. It was buried in a static glitch of a music broadcast. Knowing is the first step. Acting is the second. Are you still a puppet, Zevra? It was curt. It was cold. But it was him. Zevra pressed her hand against the screen, tears streaming down her face. He was listening. Over the next month, the messages grew longer. The ice between them began to thaw. They have me locked in the Sapphire Tower. I watch the city and I see a graveyard. I miss the sound of your ship. I miss the way the walls breathed. Zevra, the ship misses you. The neural network asks about the Silver One daily. I tell them you are busy staring at sunsets you didn't earn. Do you remember the blue sky? Riven. I dream of it every night. I dream of you standing under it with me. I am working on a plan. I will not stay here, Riven. I promise you. Zevra, don't make promises. Make an exit. Riven. The warmth returned slowly, hidden in the subtext, in the shared anger, in the longing that pulsed across light years. They were two generals on opposite sides of a war, plotting a peace that only they could see. But the Velari Empire did not sit idle. One morning, the doors to Zevra's suite hissed open. She expected a meal drone. Instead, her mother walked in. Empress Valara looked tired. Her skin was pale, and the lines around her eyes were deep. The war, or the lack of one, was taking its toll. But her posture was rigid, her authority absolute. Mother, Zevra said, standing up. She did not bow. You look well, daughter, the Empress said, walking to the window. The solitude seems to have given you clarity. It has given me perspective, Zevra said. I know why you did it. I know about the treasury logs. The Empress didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised. History is written by the survivors. Zevra. We did what was necessary to ensure the survival of our culture. The order is not free. It was theft, Zevra said. And now the debt is due. Perhaps, the Empress said, turning to face her. But we will not pay it today. The Council has deliberated on your condition. We have decided that you can still be of use. Zevra felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. Use? The fringe worlds are wavering, the Empress said. We need to solidify the core. We need to remind the high houses of their loyalty. You are going to marry. Zevra took a step back. Marry? Who? High Archon Vax of House Krell, the Empress announced. Zevra gasped. Vax was a bureaucrat of the highest order, a man twice her age who viewed the universe as a spreadsheet. He was dull, cruel in a quiet way, and utterly loyal to the old ways. He is a statue, Zevra protested. He is everything that is wrong with this empire. He is powerful, the Empress corrected, and his fleet is the only one large enough to bolster our defenses. The wedding will be in 3 days. It will be broadcast to every system, a symbol of unity. You will wear white, you will smile, and you will remind the galaxy that you are a Velari, not a concubine of the Exile. I will not do it, Zevra said, her voice shaking with rage. The Empress walked to the door. She paused, looking back with eyes that were terrifyingly empty. You will, Zevra, because if you do not, I will order the orbital bombardment of the coordinates you have been sending those little weather packets to. Yes, we found your frequency. We haven't traced the receiver yet, but we know where you are aiming. Mary Vax, or Riven Burns. The door slid shut, locking with a heavy final thud. Zevra stood in the center of the room, her hands clenched into fists. The trap had snapped shut. She had 3 days before she was shackled to a man who represented the death of her soul. 3 days before she was cut off from Riven forever. She went to the window and looked down at the city. It was a drop of 2,000 meters. The walls were sheer glass. The door was guarded by a battalion. Make an exit, Riven had said. Zevra wiped the tears from her face. She walked to her closet and pulled out the ceremonial gown she was meant to wear for the rehearsal dinner. It was red velvet, heavy and constricting. She ripped it in half. That evening, the guard rotation occurred at exactly 1900 hours. The new guard, a young lieutenant named Kyle, a distant nephew of the admiral, entered to deliver her nutrient pack. He was nervous. He had grown up worshipping the princess from afar. Now, she was a fallen angel, locked in a tower, and the rumors of her time with the humans gave her an aura of forbidden danger. Put it on the table, Zevra said. She was sitting on the edge of her bed. She had modified the ripped red dress. It was no longer a gown, it was a chaotic draping thing that exposed her shoulders and legs. She had let her silver hair fall wild around her face. She looked like a ruin, beautiful and tragic. Kyle swallowed hard. Yes, Highness. Do you think I am a monster, Kale? She asked softly. No. Highness, he stammered, keeping his eyes on the floor. I think you are a victim. I am, she lied smoothly. She stood up and walked toward him. She moved with the predatory grace she had seen on the silent god. I am a victim of this room, of this silence. Do you know what it's like to touch the stars, Kyle, and then be put in a box? She stopped inches from him. She reached out and touched the pulse point on his neck. His heart was hammering. Highness, I cannot. I don't want you to do anything, she whispered, leaning in until her lips brushed his ear. I just want you to look at me. Really look at me, not the princess, just Zevra. Kale looked up. His eyes met hers, wide and mesmerized. Zevra smiled sadly. Then, she jammed the sonic emitter she had salvaged from her jewelry, the same one she used on Riven's ship, directly into the base of his helmet. It wasn't a weapon. It was a localized frequency scrambler. But at this range, against a neural-linked helmet, it was like a hammer to the brain. Kale crumpled without a sound, unconscious before he hit the floor. Zevra moved instantly. She didn't have time for regret. She stripped the guard of his armor. It was heavy, composite plating that smelled of sweat and polish. She pulled it on over her torn dress. It was too big, but the servos adjusted automatically to her frame. She put on the helmet. The HUD flickered to life, scrolling tactical data. Identity confirmation required, the suit's AI chirped. Zevra dragged Kale's limp hand to the biometric pad on the wrist gauntlet. Scan complete. Welcome, Lieutenant Kale. She took his pulse rifle. She took his keycard. She walked out the door. The corridor was empty. She walked with a purpose, mimicking the heavy, stomping gait of the soldiers. She passed 2 other guards at the elevator. They nodded. She nodded back. She made it to the hangar bay. The gilded wing was impounded, locked down under heavy security. She couldn't take her own ship. She scanned the bay. There were rows of interceptors, sleek and fast, but they required flight codes she didn't have. Then she saw it, a garbage hauler, an automated drone barge used to ferry waste from the Citadel to the incinerator orbit. It was ugly, smelly, and invisible to the vanity of the Velari. Zevra climbed into the small maintenance cockpit of the barge. It wasn't meant for passengers. It smelled of rot and chemicals. "Destination?" the barge's simple computer asked. "Orbit," Zevra said. "Incinerator Station 4. The barge shuddered and lifted off. It moved slowly, lumbering out of the hangar bay. The flight controllers didn't even hail it. Who cared about garbage? As the barge broke the atmosphere, Zevra watched the spires of Prime shrink below her. She felt a pang of loss. She was leaving her home, her mother, her life. But then she looked up at the stars, stark and cold against the black, and felt a wild, terrifying surge of joy. "Not stronger," she whispered Riven's words. "Free." She ejected from the barge in the upper atmosphere, using the suit's thrusters to drift toward the dark side of the moon, the shadow sector. This was the underbelly of the capital, a place of smugglers, outcasts, and forgotten tech. She landed hard in an alleyway of a neon-drenched slum. She ditched the armor, stealing a cloak from a drying line to cover her red dress. She needed passage. She needed a way to cross the blockade line. She found him in a basement bar that smelled of coolant and desperation. He wasn't a man. He was a stack of servers bolted to a hover chassis, draped in synthetic rags, with a holographic face flickering above the metal. "They say you can find things," Zevra said, sitting at the dirty table. The holographic face, a jagged, pixelated smiley face, rotated to look at her. "I find things," the AI voice buzzed, sounding like a saw cutting through metal. "Data, credits, secrets. You look like a secret flesh bag." "I need a ride," Zevra said. "To the neutral crescent, past the blockade." "The blockade is tight," the AI said. "Velari patrols everywhere, costs extra, costs danger pay." "I have no credits," Zevra admitted. The AI laughed, a sound like static interference. "No credits? Then get out." "Secret." "I have codes," Zevra said, leaning forward. "I have the master override codes for the Imperial Treasury, the ones that unlock the vaults beneath the palace." The smiley face stopped rotating. It flickered and turned into a serious, high-resolution human face for a split second before reverting. "You are the princess," the AI whispered. "The traitor princess." "I am the exile," Zevra corrected, her eyes hard as flint. "Do you want the codes or not? You can rob the Empress blind, but only if you get me out of this system tonight." The AI hummed, its servers whirring as it calculated the risk versus the infinite reward. "Deal," the AI said. "My name is Glitch. Welcome to the underground, Your Highness." Zevra pulled the hood of her cloak up. She looked at the grime on her hands, the red velvet peeking out from beneath the rough fabric. She was a long way from the balcony. "Take me to the stars. Glitch," she said. "I have a war to stop." The ship that Glitch called a vessel was, in truth, a coffin with an engine strapped to its back. It was a scavenger hauler, patched together with scrap metal and optimism, lacking the sophisticated inertial dampeners of a royal cruiser. For 3 weeks, they moved through the dead zone, the uncharted scar of space that separated the Empire from the exile. It was a graveyard of stars. Here, the laws of physics were bruised and broken. They navigated through the accretion disks of dying suns, where the radiation screamed against the hull like a physical wind. They skirted the edges of collapsing wormholes that pulled at the fabric of reality, threatening to unravel them atom by atom. Zevra spent the journey in a state of fevered agony. The radiation shielding of the hauler was insufficient for a Velari physiology designed for the sterile safety of the core. The cosmic rays punched through the bulkheads, cooking her cells. She lay strapped to the pilot's chair, sweating, shivering, her body burning from the inside out. But she did not die. Instead, she changed. The dormant human DNA within her, that ancient, robust sequence Riven had spoken of, woke up to fight the radiation. It devoured the energy. It rewrote her. When she finally looked at her reflection in the polished chrome of the dashboard, she did not recognize the woman staring back. Her skin, once the pale alabaster of the Velari elite, now held a faint pearlescent luminescence. It shimmered in the dark, a soft internal bioluminescence like deep-sea coral. And her eyes, her violet eyes, had shattered. The irises were flecked with silver and gold, swirling like miniature galaxies. They held the cold, hard light of the stars she had passed. "You are glowing, flesh bag," Glitch buzzed, his holographic face flickering with concern. "Radiation levels are lethal. You should be soup. Why aren't you soup?" "I don't know," Zevra whispered, looking at her hands. The veins beneath her skin pulsed with a light that matched the rhythm of the ship's reactor. "I feel heavy, but alive." "We are arriving," Glitch announced. "Coordinates for the nearest human signature. I hope they are friendly. If not, I am ejecting you and claiming I was hijacked." They dropped out of warp space, not into a sanctuary, but into a slaughter. The destination was Outpost Onyx, a jagged mining station drilled into a massive asteroid drifting in an asteroid belt. But Onyx was burning. 3 Velari frigates, sleek, predatory ships bearing the crest of House Krell, were circling the asteroid, pounding the station's shields with plasma torrents. The human defenses were overwhelmed. Their kinetic cannons were firing desperately, but the station was venting atmosphere and debris. "We have to help them," Zevra said, unstrapping herself. "Help them?" Glitch laughed, a chaotic screech. "With what? This ship is armed with a mining laser and bad attitude. We are fleeing." "No!" Zevra shouted. Her voice resonated with a strange harmonic distortion that made the cabin vibrate. "Get us close to the primary comms array of the station. I can interface." "You are crazy," Glitch muttered, but he banked the hauler into a dive, weaving through the debris field. The Velari frigates ignored the trash barge, focusing their fire on the station's failing shield generator. Zevra scrambled to the airlock. She didn't put on a suit. She didn't need one. She grabbed a portable interface drive, a heavy slab of tech she had stolen from Prime, and slammed it into the hauler's external port. She reached out with her mind, trying to find the station's frequency. Usually, this requires code. It required security clearance. But as Zevra closed her eyes, she didn't see code. She saw light. The radiation had altered her neural pathways. She could feel the station's operating system. It was frantic, screaming in binary pain. She pushed her consciousness into the stream. "Connect," she commanded. The station's system bucked, identifying her as Velari, enemy. It shrieked. "No," Zevra thought, pushing harder, pouring her own golden bioenergy into the link. "Family." She bypassed the firewalls not by hacking them, but by dissolving them. She found the station's dormant defense grid, ancient alien tech the humans had scavenged but hadn't fully unlocked. It was a gravity well generator, designed to move asteroids. "Wake up," Zevra screamed mentally. On the surface of the asteroid, massive pylons that had been silent for centuries suddenly grown to life. They didn't fire lasers. They fired gravity. A wave of distorted space erupted from the station. It hit the lead Velari frigate like a giant, invisible fist. The ship didn't explode. It crumpled. The hull imploded, folded in on itself by sheer gravitational pressure. The other two frigates broke off their attack, their sensors blinded by the sudden gravitational anomaly. "Did you do that?" Glitch asked, his holographic mouth hanging open. "I think so," Zevra whispered, slumping against the bulkhead, her skin pulsing brightly. Before the remaining frigates could regroup, space behind the asteroid tore open. It wasn't the clean warp of the Empire, it was the violent, tearing arrival of the Exile fleet. The silent god emerged from the void, a leviathan of black muscle and red lightning. A dozen cruisers followed it. They did not hesitate. They fell upon the Krell frigates with efficient, brutal silence. Missiles that moved like swarms of insects devoured the enemy ships, stripping their shields and dissecting their hulls in seconds. It was over in moments. A channel opened on the hauler's console. "Unidentified vessel," a voice boomed. It was not Riven. It was a tactical officer. "Identify yourself or be vaporized." "It is me," Zevra said. Her voice was weak, but it carried the same harmonic resonance. Tell him the Exile has returned." The hangar bay of Outpost Onyx was a chaotic scene of smoke, sparks, and weary soldiers. When Zevra's battered scavenger ship touched down, a platoon of human marines surrounded it, weapons raised. Zevra lowered the ramp. She stepped out into the smoke. The soldiers gasped. They lowered their rifles. She looked like an apparition. Her dress was the tattered red velvet of her escape, torn and stained with grease, but her skin was glowing with a soft, ethereal light that cut through the gloom. Her silver hair floated slightly around her head, affected by the residual static of her power. The crowd parted. Commander Riven strode through the ranks. He was covered in the grime of war, his coat smelling of ozone. He stopped 10 paces from her. He looked at her, at the glow, at the eyes that held the stars, at the fierce, unbroken set of her jaw. Shock, raw and unguarded, cracked his stoic mask. "Zevra," he breathed. "I told you I wouldn't stay in the tower," she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion. Riven didn't speak. He crossed the distance in a run. He didn't care about the soldiers watching. He didn't care about protocol. He grabbed her, lifting her off her feet, burying his face in her neck. "You are alive," he choked out against her skin. "I thought, when the signal stopped, I thought they had killed you." "They tried," Zevra whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling the cold metal of his prosthetic and the heat of his back. "They failed." He set her down but didn't let go. He held her face in his hands, looking deep into her changed eyes. "What did they do to you? You are burning." "I flew through the dead zone," she said. "I changed. Riven. I'm not just Valari anymore." Riven looked at the soldiers around them, men and women who had been raised to hate her kind. They were staring at her not with hatred, but with awe. She had saved them. She had turned the enemy's weapon against itself. Riven turned to his troops, keeping his arm firmly around Zevra's waist. "Stand down!" he ordered, his voice ringing through the hangar. "She is not a prisoner. She is not a diplomat." He looked at Zevra, a fierce pride burning in his good eye. "She is one of us." The quarters Riven assigned her on the outpost were small, utilitarian, and carved from the rock of the asteroid. One wall was a massive viewport looking out at the debris field and the stars beyond. Zevra stood by the window, watching the repair drones swarm over the silent god docked nearby. She had washed the grime of the journey from her body, but the glow remained, a faint, persistent aura that made her look like a deity painted in light. The door hissed open. Riven entered. He locked it behind him. He stood there for a long moment, just watching her. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the months of separation. the fear of loss, and the sudden, violent relief of reunion. "You are different," he said softly, walking toward her. "Are you afraid?" Zevra asked, turning to face him. "Terrified," Riven admitted. He reached out, his metal hand hovering over her glowing arm. "You look like the energy that powers my ship. You look dangerous." "Good," Zevra said. "I need to be dangerous." Riven closed the gap. He touched her, and the sensation was electric. Her skin was hotter than before, vibrating with a low hum. "I missed you," he groaned, his composure shattering. "Every hour, every damn hour." He kissed her, and it was not like the first time. The first time had been discovered. This was a necessity. It was the desperate collision of two people who had looked into the abyss and chosen each other. They undressed in the starlight. Riven worshipped the changes in her. He traced the luminescent veins that ran along her ribs, kissed the glowing hollow of her throat. Zevra held him with a strength she hadn't possessed before. She anchored him. When they made love, it was with a frantic, reverent intensity. Zevra felt her own energy spiking, her glow brightening until the room was bathed in soft, violet-white light. Riven watched her, his eyes wide with wonder, as if he were making love to a star. "You are everything," he whispered against her lips, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the end and the beginning." Afterward, they lay tangled together on the narrow bed, the silence of space pressing against the glass. Zevra traced the scars on his chest, her glowing fingertips leaving fading trails of light on his skin. "We cannot just fight them. Riven," she said quietly. "If we fight a war of attrition, we lose. The Empire is too big. They have too many ships. We have the truth," Riven said, staring at the ceiling. "But truth doesn't stop plasma cannons." "We need an alliance," Zevra said, propping herself up on one elbow. Her strange eyes bore into his. "Not just a military pact, a coalition of the broken. The fringe worlds are ready to revolt. The AIs are waking up. But they are scared. They think you want to destroy the galaxy to punish the Velari." Riven was silent for a long time. He looked at his metal hand, flexing his fingers. "I did," he admitted, his voice low. "When we first came back, that was the plan. Burn the core worlds, break the great houses, let them feel the cold of the void like we did. I wanted to be the Ashmaker." He looked at her. "But then you walked onto my ship, you, the symbol of everything I hated. And you were brave. You were curious. You showed me that the Empire isn't just the Empress. It's people trapped in a lie." He took her hand. "I don't want to be the Ashmaker anymore. I want to be free, and I want them to be free." "Then we give them a third option," Zevra said, her mind racing with the strategic brilliance of her ancestors, sharpened by the ruthlessness of the exile. "The Empire offers order. You offered chaos. We need to offer evolution." She sat up, the sheet falling away from her glowing back. "We will expose the treasury logs to the entire galaxy. We will show them the lie. And while the nobles are panicking, I will go back." Riven sat up instantly. "No. You are never going back there." "Not as a prisoner," Zevra said firmly. "As a ghost. I know the secret routes into the core. I know the disillusioned nobles, the ones like Kale, the guard I knocked out. They are waiting for a leader. I will recruit them. I will plant the seeds of rebellion right under my mother's throne." "It is suicide," Riven said. "It is the only way," Zevra countered. "You squeeze them from the outside. I break them from the inside. We are the bridge. Riven. You and I." Riven looked at her, seeing the warrior she had become. He realized he couldn't stop her. She wasn't his to protect anymore. She was his equal. "We build a coalition," he agreed, nodding slowly. Humans, AIs, aliens, exiles, and Velari defectors. We build an army of the unwanted. The next 6 months were a blur of shadow and motion. The coalition of the Rift was born not in grand halls, but in cargo bays and mining tunnels. Zevra and Riven traveled the fringe. They met with the mycelium hive minds, a species of sentient fungus the Velari had bombed into silence. Zevra promised them regrowing worlds. They met with the Cyber Collective, rogue AIs hiding in deep space servers. Riven promised them citizenship, not servitude. The fleet grew. It was a ragtag armada of rusted hulks and sleek biomechanical warships, flying side by side. Then, the second phase began. Zevra returned to Velari space. She did not take the Gilded Wing. She took a black stealth corvette, piloted by Glitch. She wore a holographic shroud that masked her glowing skin and altered her face, turning her into a nondescript noblewoman from a minor house. She infiltrated the high society parties of the core worlds. She whispered in the ears of generals who were tired of the Empress's cruelty. She passed encrypted data slates to scholars who suspected history had been edited. She was standing on the terrace of a floating garden on the planet Cyril, attending a masquerade ball, when the trap sprung. She had just finished speaking with a young duke who controlled the orbital shipyards. He was sympathetic. He had taken the data slate. As he walked away, the shadows on the terrace lengthened. The air grew unnaturally cold. The chatter of the party inside faded into a dull murmur. Zevra stopped. Her skin began to prickle, not with fear, but with a warning. Her enhanced senses, gifted by the radiation, felt the disturbance in the air pressure. "Hello, princess," a voice hissed. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A figure detached itself from the darkness of a monolithic statue. It was a shadow stalker, an elite assassin of the Empress, modified for invisibility and silence. He wore a suit that bent light around him, making him look like a hole in reality. "My mother sends her regards," the assassin said. He moved faster than I expected. A monofilament blade, invisible to the naked eye, slashed at her throat. Zevra didn't have a weapon. She didn't have armor, but she had the dead zone inside her. She threw up her hand. She didn't try to block the blade. She tried to block the space the blade occupied. "Push," she screamed internally. The dormant power that had crushed the frigate at the outpost surged. A shockwave of kinetic violet light erupted from her palm. It hit the assassin midair. The impact was like a thunderclap. The stealth field around the assassin shattered, revealing a lanky, terrifyingly pale humanoid. He was thrown backward, smashing through the stone railing of the terrace, but he was a shadow stalker. He twisted in the air, landing on the wall, defying gravity. He pulled a pistol, a silent needler. Zevra didn't run. She felt the power uncoiling in her blood, hot and demanding. She felt the starlight in her eyes burning. She stomped her foot on the marble floor. A pulse of pure energy rippled out from her, cracking the stone. It hit the assassin just as he fired. The needle dart disintegrated in the wave of force. The assassin was lifted off the wall and slammed into the side of the floating garden's gravity generator. There was a sickening crunch. The assassin slid to the ground, broken. Zevra stood there, breathing hard, the holographic shroud flickering and failing around her. Her skin was glowing so brightly now that it illuminated the dark terrace. The guests inside were screaming. They had seen the flash. Zevra tapped her comms. "Glitch! Extraction! Now!" "I am already crashing the party." Glitch's voice buzzed. The black Corvette roared out of the clouds, its ramp lowering. Zevra jumped, using a burst of telekinetic force to propel herself upward, catching the edge of the ramp. Back on the silent god. Riven watched the security footage Glitch had recorded from Zevra's suit. He watched her move. He watched the violet shockwave. He watched her eyes burning with power that belonged to neither human nor Velari. Zevra sat on the edge of the command table, a medic tending to a scratch on her arm. She looked exhausted, but exhilarated. "I didn't know I could do that," she said, looking at her hands. "It felt instinctual, like the universe paused for me." Riven turned off the screen. He looked at her with a profound realization. The prophecy of the Velari spoke of a perfect being, one of pure order. The myths of humanity spoke of a savior, one of pure will. Zevra was neither. She was the chaos that created order. She was the mutation that ensured survival. "You aren't just an ally anymore, Zevra," Riven said quietly, walking over to her. He knelt, taking her glowing hand in his metal one. "What am I?" she asked. "You are the evolution," Riven said. "You are the bridge. The Empire cannot claim you because you are human. I cannot claim you because you are Velari. You belong to the future." He stood up, looking at the star map where dozens of worlds were blinking yellow, the color of the rebellion. "And now," Riven said, his voice hardening with resolve, "the future is coming for them." The silence that had held the galaxy in a fragile suspension for 1,000 years did not break. It shattered. The fracture began not with a weapon discharge, but with a proclamation. From the crystal spires of Prime to the rusted orbital docks of the Outer Rim, the holonet turned crimson. The seal of the High Council, usually a beacon of serene blue, burned with the color of blood. The Grand Chancellor, a man whose voice had lulled generations into compliance, spoke with the tremors of a cornered animal. "Citizens of the Spiral," his voice boomed across trillions of screens. "The threat is no longer theoretical. The barbaric remnants of the pre-order era have aligned with traitors from within our own bloodlines. They call themselves liberators. We call them the echoes of exile. As of this hour, the Galactic Council formally declares a state of total war upon the human fleet and any world that harbors them. There will be no quarter. There will be no negotiation. Order must be preserved." The declaration was a sledgehammer. It forced every world, every governor, and every captain to choose a side. On the bridge of the silent god. Zevra watched the broadcast. She stood bathed in the red light of the enemy's anger, her own skin pulsing with a defiant bioluminescent white. Beside her, Riven stood like a statue of black iron, his human hand resting on the hilt of a kinetic blade, his mechanical eye whirring as it processed the tactical data flooding the room. "They have given us a name," Riven said, his voice low and dangerous. "Echoes." "They want to make us sound like ghosts," Zevra replied, her voice resonating with the strange harmonic power she had gained in the dead zone. "They want the galaxy to believe we are fading memories. We need to show them we are the future." She turned to the communications officer, a woman plugged directly into the ship's nerve center. "Open a channel. Override frequency Alpha 10. Get me into the council chamber." "Highness?" The officer hesitated. "That frequency is shielded by the Royal Guard protocols. It is impossible to breach." Zevra walked to the console. She placed her glowing hand on the interface. "Nothing is impossible anymore. Connect me." She closed her eyes. She felt the data stream like a river of light. She didn't hack it. She simply commanded the electrons to bend. The encryption shattered. The Grand Council chamber on Prime was a cavernous amphitheater of floating platforms, where the representatives of the 100 houses sat in judgment of the universe. The air was filled with the polite murmur of genocide, admirals discussing kill zones, treasurers calculating the cost of orbital bombardments. Suddenly, the central pillar of light, reserved for the Empress, flickered and died. A massive holographic projection erupted in the center of the room. It was not the Empress. It was Zevra. She looked terrifying. She was not wearing the nano-silk of a princess, but a combat suit of matte black human weave, armored and severe. Her hair floated in a zero-gravity halo, and her eyes burned with the light of captured stars. Her skin glowed, casting long, eerie shadows across the terrified faces of the counselors. "Silence," she commanded. The word hit the room like a physical wave. The murmurs died instantly. "You call us echoes," Zevra said, her voice amplified to rattle the teeth of the nobles. "You call us a disease, but I stand before you as the daughter of House Velari, and I tell you that the sickness is in this room." "Cut the feed!" Admiral Kalen shouted, standing up on his platform. "Silence the traitor." "You cannot silence the truth, Admiral," Zevra said calmly. She raised her hand, and the air above the counselors filled with documents, millions of pages of text, charts, and video logs cascaded like rain. It was the Treasury Archive. It was the proof of the great lie. "Look at them," Zevra demanded. "Look at the dates. Look at the signatures. Humanity was not exiled for violence. They were exiled for profit. My ancestors, your ancestors, feared their invention. They feared a galaxy where merit outweighed bloodline. You have sent billions to die in the mines and the void, not to keep them safe, but to keep your profit margins intact." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Younger nobles were grabbing the floating data streams, reading the damning text. The older generation looked pale, their foundational myths crumbling in real time. "I declare myself independent of Velari law," Zevra announced. "I renounce my title. I renounce my inheritance. I am no longer Princess Zevra of the High House. I am Zevra of the Unbound, and I am coming home." The hologram vanished. The silent god shuddered as it entered hyperspace. It was not alone. Behind it trailed a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. There were the organic, shark-like ships of humanity, sleek and black. There were the rusted, bolted-together hulks of the fringe miners. There were the crystal matrix vessels of the liberated AIs. It was a carnival of the forgotten, a swarm of the oppressed. "Targeting solution locked," Riven announced from the command deck. "We arrive in the capital system in 2 hours." He turned to his tactical officers. "Remember the rules of engagement. We do not fire on civilian habitats. We do not target life support grids. Our targets are the truth vaults, the central data cores of the Ministry of Information. We are not here to burn their bodies. We are here to burn their censorship." Zevra stood by the viewport, watching the stars streak by. She felt a heavy, cold knot in her stomach. She had declared war on the Council, but there was one conversation she had avoided, one connection she hadn't severed. "I need to speak to her," Zevra whispered. Riven moved to her side. He didn't ask who. He knew. "She will use it against you," Riven warned gently. "She will try to break you." "I know," Zevra said, "but she is my mother. If there is even 1% of a chance that she will surrender without a fight, I have to take it. I have to try to save her from herself." Riven nodded to the comms officer. "Open a direct encrypted line to the Diamond Throne. Priority overrides." The screen in front of Zevra shimmered. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, the image coalesced. Empress Valara sat on her throne. She was fully armored in a gold ceremonial plate, a crown of razor-sharp diamonds on her head. She looked like an idol of war. Her face was a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. "Mother," Zevra said. You have a lot of courage to call me traitor, the Empress said. Her voice was not angry, it was dead. It was the voice of a glacier. Please, Zevra begged, the tears threatening to spill despite her resolve. Look at the fleet I am bringing. Look at the unrest in your own council. You cannot win this. The lie is out. The galaxy knows. The galaxy knows what I tell it to know, the Empress replied. Mobs are fickle, Zevra. They riot today. They kneel tomorrow when the food synthesizers turn back on. I don't want to destroy Prime, Zevra said, her voice shaking. I don't want to hurt you. Stand down. Abdicate. We can build something new, a council of all species. You can still be a part of it. The Empress laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. Part of a council with fungus and machines, you have lost your mind as well as your soul. Mother, please, Zevra pressed, stepping closer to the screen. I found love. I found the truth. Riven isn't a monster. He is a man who was wronged. If you just meet him, I do not treat with mongrels. The Empress cut her off sharp as a knife. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And as for you, do not call me mother. My daughter died the day she walked onto that abomination of a ship. I am still your blood, Zevra cried. You are contaminated, the Empress spat. You think you are a revolutionary? You are just a bored little girl who fell in love with a pirate. You threw away 1,000 years of lineage for a warm body in your bed. Zevra recoiled as if slapped. It is about freedom. It is about lust, the Empress sneered. You already chose the exile's bed. Now you can lie in his grave. The screen went black. Zevra stood frozen. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Every officer, every drone, every crewman had heard the rejection. It was total. It was final. Her legs gave out. She didn't fall to the floor. Riven caught her. He was there instantly, his arms wrapping around her as she crumbled. She buried her face in his coat, sobbing. Not the polite, silent weeping of a princess, but the raw, gasping grief of a child who has been orphaned. She hates me, Zevra choked out. She erased me. I have nothing left. I have no name. I have no home. Riven lifted her chin. He forced her to look at him. His blue machine eye was dim, his human eye burning with a fierce, protective intensity. Look at me, he commanded softly. Zevra blinked through her tears, her glowing skin dimming with her sorrow. You have not lost everything, Riven said, his voice rough with emotion. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his metal thumb. You shed a skin that was too small for you. You lost a title that was a chain. He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. You have a fleet that would die for you. You have a galaxy waiting for you, and you have me. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of reverence. She said you are nothing? No. You have become everything. Zevra took a shuddering breath. She drew strength from him, from the solid, unshakable reality of his presence. She felt the hum of the silent god beneath her feet, her new home. She straightened up. She wiped her face. When she opened her eyes, the stars were back in them, brighter than before. All hands, Zevra said, her voice steadying, rising into a command. Prepare to jump. We will end this. The arrival of the Coalition fleet in the Prime system was an event that defied physics. They didn't emerge from a single vector. They emerged from hundreds. Riven had coordinated a micro-jump strategy, surrounding the planet of Prime in a sphere of ships. The Vehlari Armada was waiting. 10,000 warships, glistening in gold and silver, formed a defensive shell around the world. They have raised the planetary shield, the tactical officer shouted. It is a Class 1 barrier, impenetrable. We cannot bombard the data cores if the shield is up. We don't need to bombard it, Zevra said from the command platform. We just need to knock. She opened the fleet-wide channel, but she didn't broadcast to her ships. She broadcast to the enemy. This is Zevra! Her voice rang out across the system, overriding the military bands. Soldiers of the Velari, captains of the high houses, you know me. You swore oaths to protect me. I am not asking you to fire on your empress. I am asking you to stop protecting a lie. Look at your sensors. Look at who stands beside me. We are not invaders. We are the return. On the bridge of the Velari flagship Sovereign, a young communications officer looked at his console. It was Lieutenant Kale, the man Zevra had knocked out and spared in the tower. He had been demoted, reassigned, but he was there. He looked at the shield controls. He looked at the image of Zevra on his screen, glowing with power, leading an army of the broken. For the princess, Kale whispered. He didn't lower the shield. He inverted the harmonic frequency. The massive golden energy barrier surrounding Prime didn't vanish. It shattered. It turned into a cascade of harmless static rain that fell into the atmosphere. Shields are down, Riven roared. All wings, target the ministry spires, precision strikes only. Do not touch the civilian blocks. The battle was a chaos of light. The human ships moved like living things, weaving through the heavy formations of the Velari dreadnoughts. They fired data spikes, physical missiles loaded with viruses and truth algorithms, directly into the server towers of the capital city. On the ground, the citizens of Prime looked up. They didn't see bombs falling. They saw giant screens flickering. The propaganda feeds died. In their place, the treasury logs appeared. The videos of the exile appeared. The truth, raw and ugly, was plastered on every surface of the city. The Empress watched from the balcony of the palace. She watched her control disintegrate. She watched her own ships holding their fire, refusing to slaughter the human fleet. They will not fight, she whispered, her face twisting into a mask of insanity. They have been infected. She turned to her High Chamberlain. Initiate the Omega Protocol. Chamberlain went pale. Your Majesty. Omega it is a planet killer. It is a gravity singularity. If you fire it in high orbit, it will consume the enemy fleet, but it will also tear the atmosphere off Prime. We will all die. Better death than impurity, the Empress hissed. She pulled a key from around her neck. She jammed it into the console on the balcony. Burn it all! In the center of the city, the central spire of the palace began to split open. A massive, dark machine rose from the depths. It hummed with a sound that made bones ache. It was the Star Eater, a forbidden weapon from the ancient wars. Riven! Zevra shouted, pointing at the tactical screen. Energy spikes on the surface. Massive scale, it is a singularity buildup. She's going to kill the planet, Riven realized, horror dawning on his face. She's going to create a black hole right here. We have to stop it, Zevra said. The data spikes won't work on that. It is hardwired. It needs to be disabled manually. I'm going, Riven said. He didn't hesitate. He ran for the hangar bay. Riven, no! Zevra chased after him. You can't get close to that. The gravitational shear will crush a ship. Riven stopped at the airlock of his personal interceptor, a small, impossibly fast strike craft. He turned to her. My arm, he said, holding up his prosthetic. It is made of neutronium alloy. It can withstand the shear for a few seconds, long enough to jam the containment field. It's a suicide run, Zevra cried, grabbing his lapels. I just got you back. I won't let you go. Zevra, Riven said, his voice calm amidst the screaming sirens. You told me we build a galaxy that doesn't call us enemies. If I don't do this, there is no galaxy. There is only a grave. He kissed her hard, a kiss of goodbye and promise. Guide me. Use your sight. Interface with my nav computer. Be my eyes. He jumped into the cockpit. The canopy is sealed. Zevra ran back to the bridge. She slammed her hands onto the tactical table. Connect me to Riven. Full neural link. The connection snapped into place. She wasn't just watching him. She was with him. She felt the G-forces as his interceptor shot out of the silent god like a bullet. She saw the battlefield through his eyes. Left. She projected into his mind. Flak cannons on the ridge. Riven banked hard, dodging a stream of plasma. He dove toward the planet, breaking the cloud layer. The city of Prime spread out below him, a sprawling geometric paradise now lit by the fires of revolution. In the center, the Star Eater was glowing with a terrifying violet light. The singularity was forming. A ball of pure darkness hovered above the spire, eating the light around it. The field is destabilizing. Zevra's voice echoed in his head. You have to hit the regulator ring. It's the spinning section at the base. I see it, Riven thought, holding course. The gravity around the spire was immense. Riven's ship began to groan. The metal screamed. The warning lights turned the cockpit red. Riven. Pull up, Zevra screamed. It's too strong. Not yet. Riven gritted his teeth. Blood was running from his nose. The pressure was crushing him. Almost. There. He didn't fire missiles. He rammed the ship. He ejected at the last microsecond. His ejection seat rocketed away, encased in a stasis field, but his interceptor slammed directly into the spinning regulator ring of the weapon. The impact was catastrophic. The machine shattered, but the singularity had already formed. It was small, the size of an apple, but it was infinite. Without the containment field, it didn't grow to consume the planet. It collapsed. No! Zevra screamed, her mind linked to Riven as he tumbled through the air, falling toward the imploding weapon. She reached out, not with her hands, not with the ship's tractor beam. She reached out with the power she had unlocked in the dead zone. She reached out with every ounce of the golden energy in her veins. She grabbed him across 10 miles of vacuum and atmosphere. She felt the weight of him. She felt the hunger of the black hole trying to eat him. She screamed, her body on the bridge glowing so bright it was blinding. She pulled. She tore the fabric of space. On the surface, the singularity detonated. It wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was a silent, expanding wave of distortion. It erased the palace. It erased the Empress on her balcony. It erased the center of the city of Camber. But it stopped. Zevra collapsed on the bridge, unconscious. When she woke, the room was quiet. Riven, she rasped. He is alive, the medic said gently, pressing a hypospray to her neck. We retrieved his pod. He has multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and his prosthetic is fused, but he is alive. Zevra slumped back, tears of relief washing the starlight from her eyes. And the weapon? She asked. Gone, the tactical officer said, his voice hushed with awe. But, Highness, you should look at the main screen. Zevra pulled herself up. She looked at the viewport. Prime was still there. The city was scarred, the palace gone. But above the planet, where the weapon had detonated, something new hung in the sky. It was not a black hole. It was a tear in reality, a swirling spiral-shaped anomaly of blue and gold light. It looked like a doorway. It looked like an eye. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched Zevra's own heart. What is it? Someone whispered. It is not a weapon, Zevra said, feeling the truth of it vibrate in her bones. It is a change. The exile is over. The door is open. She looked at the spiral. spinning silently in the void. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was an omen that the rules of the universe had just been rewritten. "The old galaxy is dead," Zevra whispered. "Now, we see what comes next." The war did not end with a signature on a piece of parchment. It did not end with a handshake or a surrender ceremony broadcast to the waiting billions. Wars of ideology never do. They end like a fever breaking, a sudden sweating relief followed by the shaking weakness of recovery. The explosion of the Star Eater weapon had torn a hole in the sky above Prime. It hung there, a swirling vortex of azure and gold, a permanent scar on the face of the heavens that the scientists called a stable wormhole and the priests called the Eye of Judgment. It was a constant reminder that the old laws of physics, like the old laws of the Velari, no longer applied. The Empire did not survive the week. With the Empress gone, vaporized in the singularity she had created, the central nervous system of the great houses collapsed. Without the dictatorial gravity of the Diamond Throne, the noble families turned on one another. Governors hoarded fleets, admirals seized sectors. The monolithic order of the Velari fractured into 1,000 shards of petty kingdoms and desperate alliances. But amidst the chaos, there was a new stability rising. The coalition of the Rift, led by the surviving commanders of humanity and the liberated artificial intelligences, established the free zones. These were sectors where no banner flew, where trade was open, and where the truth vaults, now accessible to anyone with a data pad, were the only law. Zevra walked through the ruins of the Imperial Palace. The main spire was gone, eaten by the weapon, but the lower courtyards remained. They were crowded now, not with sycophants in silk, but with soldiers, refugees, and the architects of the new world. She moved through them like a ghost. Her skin still held the faint pearlescent luminescence from the dead zone, marking her as something other. The soldiers, human and alien alike, parted for her, bowing not out of protocol but out of a terrified reverence. They had seen her pull a man from a black hole. They had seen her rewrite the sky. She found the Provisional Council gathered in the Hall of Mirrors. It was a room that had once been used for balls. Now, it was a war room covered in tactical maps and supply manifests. "Highness," Admiral Kalen said. He had survived the purge, turning his coat at the last second to join the winning side. He stood at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable in the presence of the diverse crowd of humans, cyborgs, and aliens. "We have drafted the constitution of the reborn state." He slid a data slate across the table. It was heavy, bound in the traditional platinum of the Velari. "We need a figurehead," Kalen said, his voice smoothing into the practiced cadence of a courtier. "The galaxy is terrified. They see the anomaly in the sky, and they panic. They need a face they recognize. They need a Velari." Zevra looked at the slate. She looked at the throne that had been hastily dragged into the center of the room. It was not the Diamond Throne. That was gone. But it was high, gilded, and lonely. "You want me to rule," Zevra said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the harmonic distortion that made the glass in the mirrors vibrate. "We want you to stabilize," Kalen corrected. "You are the bridge. Zevra, you are the hero of the revolution. If you sit on that throne, the noble houses will fall in line. The humans trust you. The AIs listen to you. You can unite the spiral." Zevra reached out and touched the velvet arm of the throne. She thought of her mother, sitting rigid and cold, encased in gold until her humanity had withered away. She thought of the view from the sapphire tower, looking down on a world she was forbidden to touch. "I liberated the galaxy from a throne," Zevra said, turning back to them. Why would I build another one? Because without order, there is chaos, a human general argued. Then let there be chaos. Zevra replied. Chaos is just freedom that hasn't learned to walk yet. She pushed the data slate back across the table. I will not be your empress. I will not be your queen. I did not fight to exchange one cage for another. Then what will you be? Kalen asked, frustration leaking into his voice. Where will you go? The galaxy looks to you for direction. Zevra looked toward the open balcony, toward the swirling anomaly in the sky, and then toward the hangar bays where the silent god was undergoing final repairs. I wasn't born to rule, Admiral, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. I was born to change, and I have done that. She turned and walked out of the Hall of Mirrors, leaving the empty throne behind her. She did not look back. The disappearance of Zevra and Commander Riven became the first great myth of the new era. They did not announce their departure, and there were no speeches. One morning, the docking clamps of the silent god released. The massive, biomechanical ship, scarred and welded from the battle, lifted silently into the upper atmosphere of Prime. It did not hail the traffic controllers. It simply turned its nose toward the unknown and engaged its drive. It vanished into the spiral rift, the very tear in space where humanity had once been exiled. For months, the galaxy speculated. Some said they had gone back to Earth, the lost cradle of humanity, to rebuild it from the ashes of the climate collapse. Others whispered that they had gone beyond the rim of the galaxy entirely, seeking a place where the stars had no names. The religious cults that sprang up around Zevra's image claimed she had ascended, becoming a being of pure energy who watched over the free zones. The truth was quieter and far more human. They had gone to the quiet sector. It was a region of space ignored by the star charts, a pocket of nebula gas and drifting asteroids where no strategic resources existed. There, on a terraformed moon orbiting a gas giant of swirling violet storms, they had stopped running. Riven had not been idle. His body was broken, his neutronium arm fused and useless, his ribs knit together with synthetic mesh, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He had used the fabrication drones of the silent god to build something impossible. He built a house. It was not a palace. It was a structure of glass and dark wood, grown from the soil and shaped by the ship's biomatter. It sat on a ridge overlooking a valley of crystalline sand. And above the valley, Riven had built a sky. He had deployed a network of atmospheric projectors, a dome of energy that filtered the harsh light of the nebula and simulated the atmosphere of a world Zevra had only ever seen in her genetic memories. It was blue. Zevra stood under it now. She was heavy with life, her belly swollen, her hands resting protectively on the child that grew within her. She looked up at the artificial azure expanse, watching the simulated clouds drift by. The light was warm on her face, a yellow, nurturing warmth that felt like a memory of a life she had never lived. Does it look right? Riven stepped up behind her. He walked with a slight limp now, the legacy of his jump into the gravity well. He had replaced his fused combat arm with a simpler prosthetic, one made of matte ceramic that looked less like a weapon and more like a hand. It looks perfect, Zevra whispered. She leaned back against him, letting his strength support her. It looks like a dream. Riven wrapped his arms around her, his hands resting over hers on her stomach. The sensors picked up a Velari scout ship 3 sectors away. They are searching for us. Let them search, Zevra said. They are looking for a warship. They won't look for a garden. She turned in his arms, looking up at his face. The lines of tension that had defined him for so long had softened. The soldier was fading. The builder was emerging. "Is it time?" Riven asked, his eyes searching hers. Zevra nodded, a sudden sharp intake of breath signaling the contraction. "Yes, she is ready." The birth was not attended by royal physicians or medical droids. It was attended by Riven and the ship's medical avatar, a soft-voiced hologram that guided them through the darkness of the night. It was long, and it was hard. Zevra's physiology, altered by the dead zone and the radiation, fought the process. Her bioluminescence flared with every wave of pain, lighting the room in blinding pulses of white and gold. Riven held her hand, his metal fingers cool against her burning skin, whispering to her in the old language of Earth, words of courage and endurance. When the child finally cried, the sound was not the thin wail of a Velari infant, nor the harsh cry of a human. It was a melodic, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate in the very air of the room. Riven lifted the baby. He wrapped her in a cloth woven from the nanosilk of Zevra's old life and the wool of the new world. He went still. "Zevra," he breathed. "Look." Zevra pulled herself up, exhausted, her glow dimmed to a soft ember. She looked at her daughter. The child was small, with skin that held the faintest shimmer of pearl. But it was her eyes that stopped Zevra's heart. They were not violet. They were not brown. They were deep, endless pools of black, filled with swirling constellations of gold and silver. When the baby blinked, the stars within her eyes seemed to move. She did not just reflect the light, she contained it. "She has the galaxy in her eyes," Zevra whispered, reaching out to touch the infant's cheek. "A hybrid," Riven said, his voice filled with a terrifying awe. "Velari, humans, and something else, something the radiation gave you. She is the future," Zevra said. She took the child into her arms. The baby looked at her, really looked at her, with an intelligence that was ancient and immediate. "The empires will fear her, Riven. They will look at her and see the end of their bloodlines." "Let them fear," Riven said, leaning down to kiss Zevra's sweat-dampened forehead. "They cannot stop her. They couldn't stop us." They named her Lyra, after the constellation that pointed the way to Earth. 3 months later, the artificial sky was at its brightest. It was noon in the sanctuary. Riven had cleared the floor of the main viewing chamber, replacing the furniture with soft mats and cushions. The glass walls were open to the air, letting in the scent of the strange, sweet flowers that grew in the valley. Zevra lay on the cushions watching Riven. He was playing with Lyra, holding the child up to the light. The baby was laughing, creating small, telekinetic ripples in the air that made the dust motes dance. Riven handed the child to the medical drone, which took her to the nursery for her nap. Then, he turned to Zevra. The look in his eyes was different today. It was heavy with the realization of what they had survived. "We stopped running," he said, sitting down beside her. "We stopped fighting," Zevra corrected. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw. "There is a difference." Riven captured her hand. He kissed the palm, then the wrist. "I built this sky for you because you told me you had never seen one. But do you know what I dreamed of in the dark, Zevra? Before I met you?" "Revenge," Zevra said softly. "Silence," Riven corrected. "I dreamed of a silence that wasn't empty, a silence that didn't scream." He leaned over her, bracing himself on his arms. "You gave me that silence. You gave me peace." "I gave you trouble," Zevra teased, though her voice was thick with emotion. "I gave you a war, a shattered arm, and a fugitive life. You gave me everything, Riven said. He kissed her. It was a kiss of finality and beginning. It was not the desperate collision of the war, nor the frantic need of the night before the battle. It was slow. It was deep. It was the act of two people memorizing each other for the long peace ahead. They made love beneath the false sky, their bodies moving in a rhythm that felt like the tides of an ocean Zevra had only ever imagined. Riven touched her with a reverence that bordered on worship, his hands mapping the changes in her body, the softness that had returned after the birth, the lingering heat of her power. Zevra looked up at him, at the man who had once been the nightmare of the galaxy. She saw the scars on his chest, the metal of his arm, and she saw beauty. She saw the endurance of a species that refused to die. When it was over, they lay tangled together, listening to the wind rustle the leaves outside. "Do you miss it?" Riven asked after a long time. "The palace? The power?" Zevra laughed, a low, throaty sound. "I miss the plumbing. I do not miss the power." She sat up, pulling the sheet around her. Power is just the ability to make people afraid. What we have. This is influence. This is a legacy. "Lyra," Riven said. "Lyra," Zevra agreed. "And whatever comes after her." That evening, as the artificial sun began to set, painting the dome in hues of violet and fire, they walked out into the garden. Riven had been working on this part of the sanctuary for weeks. He had taken the silicate sand of the moon and used the ship's plasma torches to fuse it. He had sculpted a field of flowers. They were made of glass, thousands of them. Roses, lilies, alien blooms from worlds that no longer existed. They were fragile, transparent, catching the dying light and refracting it into a million rainbows. They walked hand in hand through the crystalline field. The sound of the wind moving through the glass petals was like 1,000 tiny chimes, a music of delicate permanence. Zevra stopped in the center of the field. She wore a simple tunic of white linen, her silver hair loose down her back. She looked at the flowers, then out toward the horizon where the real nebula swirled in the dark. "They are still out there," she said. "The remnants of the houses, the warlords. They are waiting for us to slip up. They are waiting for us to die so they can rewrite history again." "History is stubborn," Riven said, squeezing her hand. "It remembers the scars." "Do you think they learned?" Zevra asked. "Do you think the Empire understands why they lost?" Riven looked down at his metal hand. He flexed the fingers, watching the light play off the ceramic. "They think they lost because we had better weapons," Riven said. "Or because you betrayed them. Or because of the singularity." "They are wrong," Zevra said. She turned to him. Her eyes, now calm but still holding the flecks of starlight, bore into his. "They lost because they forgot what it means to be human," she said. "They forgot that you can burn a city, but you cannot burn a memory. They forgot that exile isn't a prison. It is a forge." She looked back at the glass flowers, resilient and beautiful in a hostile world. "They banished you to the dark," Zevra whispered, her voice carrying on the wind. "They thought the cold would kill you. They thought the silence would break you. They exiled your kind, but now they kneel." Riven smiled. It was not a smile of triumph, but of peace. "We didn't come back to make them kneel, Zevra," he said softly. "We came back to help them stand up." Zevra rested her head on his shoulder. "Perhaps. But they had to fall first." They stood there as the lights of the artificial sky faded and the true stars emerged. The chaotic, beautiful, unplanned stars of the quiet sector. They were two outcasts who had broken the wheel of history. They had no crowns. They had no armies. But they had the truth, and they had the future sleeping in a crib made of nanosilk. Humanity's power had never been about domination. It wasn't about the size of the fleet or the heat of the plasma. It was a memory. It was the stubborn refusal to forget the blue sky. It was the freedom to choose a dangerous truth over a safe lie. And above all, it was the courage to return to the place that had rejected them and say, "I am here." Zevra looked at the stars, and then at the man beside her. "Humanity was exiled from the galaxy," she said, her voice a final testament to the silence, "and came back with power no empire could ever understand.